I'm going to begin with a little story some of you have heard. I'm directionally challenged. I get lost very easily. I forget where my car is parked. I forget where I live. I forget all sorts of things. I spent a lot of time up in Parliament House in Canberra, and even though it's a beautifully laid out building, I still manage to get lost. The political class, contrary to the stereotype, has been incredibly helpful to me while I've been wandering around looking lost. In fact, I think, Wayne, a couple of times you might have told me where to go, which has been, it showed me directions, which has been really good. On one occasion, I was standing in front of a lift and I was looking typically lost, looking at my phone, looking at the room I was supposed to be in, and a security guy was standing next to me and says, "What are you looking for, mate?" Typical, people reaching out. And I told him the room, and he goes, "Well, for a start, mate, you're on the wrong floor." I said, "That'd be right, mate, I'm directionally challenged." Started telling him the story of my life, as you do. And he said, "Come on, I'll take you there." And again, typical, people don't trust me to find my own way. Once given directions, they take me by the hand and hand me over to the next person. And so we're in the lift and he looks at my security pass and he says, "So where are you from, mate?" And he reads the security pass. He goes, "St. Vincent de Paul." He goes, "You from Vinnie's, mate?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Come here, let me give you a hug." I said, "Oh, that's very nice of you, mate. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" He goes, "Mate, I want to thank you for everything you've done." I said, "Man, I haven't bloody done anything. I'm the one that's lost. You're helping me." And he goes, "You know, your people." I said, yeah, my people are magnificent." He said, "Let me tell you my story. Do you want to hear my story?" I said, "Mate, I eat stories for breakfast. Please tell me." And he said, "Look, I was unemployed for quite a long time, had a few health problems, got this job now, pays shit, but at least it's a start." And he said, "I'm starting to get my life together." But he said, "I was unemployed for a long period and I was living in Nowra, and Centrelink sent me for a job interview at Wollongong. Hopped on the train, went to the interview, all good, sweet as. Walked out, realised I didn't have two bob to rub together." And he said, "I thought to myself, you know, I haven't even got enough for a pie and a cup of tea, let alone a train ticket." He said, "What can I do?" He said, "I thought to myself, who can I turn to in my hour of need? Where can I go for help? Who can I cry out to?" He said, "You said you're from Vinnie's, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, actually it was the Salvos." He said, "You don't mind, do you?" I said, "Yeah, mate, I do, actually." He said, I said, "I don't want to hear good news stories about the competition." He said, "That's a joke, right?" I said, "Yes, mate, that's a joke." Anyway, he took me to the room I was meant to be in, and a few weeks later I ran into the then National Secretary of the Salvation Army. And I said, "Kelvin, I've got a good story for you. You're not going to be able to top this." And he said, "Oh, let's hear it, John." And there is a bit of friendly competition. I mean, they've got the bloody uniforms and, you know, we got nothing, just bloody apron and a hat, you know. So, and I told him the story and he said, "I can top that, John." He said, "As a matter of fact, I've run into the same bloke a couple of weeks after you." And he told me the identical story as you've just told. He said, "But with one difference. At the end of telling me the story, this guy pulled out of his pocket an envelope and gave it to me. It had $20 in it, and he said, 'Can you give this to the Salvos who helped me out in Wollongong?'" Now, comrades, this story breaks my heart because this is the man. This man is typical of so many who are despised and degraded, shattered and shunned, demonised, blamed for their own exclusion, blamed for bearing the brunt of their inequality. You know, you're not going to see this story on the front page of a tabloid, but you are going to see stories that absolutely pile blame on people who are unemployed or underemployed or insecurely employed. At the very best, someone like this man is told that if you wait long enough and if you're patient enough, some of the wealth will trickle down. Comrades, I've been around for long enough and I've listened hard, but I'm yet to hear the sound of the wealth trickling down. But what I do hear is the sound of the excluded still waiting. But when he had a few bob to rub together, and make no mistake, what he gave was a huge chunk of dough for someone on a low pay. But what he gave was not charity. What he gave was solidarity. Solidarity Solidarity is the tenderness of the people, and it's our not-so-secret weapon in the face of neoliberalism. And he's told to wait, but he didn't wait to express that solidarity and to give what he could to the next person who was crushed by neoliberalism. But all we continue to hear is the sound of the excluded still waiting. When you've got a minimum wage that sits around 40% of the average wage, that's the sound of the excluded still waiting. When you've got a New Start payment that sits around 40% of the minimum wage, that's the sound of the excluded still waiting. When you've got around 116,000 people experiencing homelessness on any given night in prosperous Australia, that is the sound of the excluded waiting. When you've got 200,000 households on the waiting list for social housing, when housing, which should be a human right, has become a speculative sport, that's the sound of the excluded still waiting. Homelessness, make no mistake, homelessness is not caused by poverty. Homelessness is caused by wealth, speculative wealth. When you've got resources being ripped out of public schools to the tune of 1.9 billion and resources being flooded into schools that do not need them, that's the sound of the excluded still waiting. When you've got penalty rates being cut, when you've got an increase in the people who are having to work 2 jobs in order to make ends meet and keep a roof over their heads, that's the sound of the excluded still waiting. You don't build a strong economy or a fair society by ramping up inequality. Neoliberalism isn't the government stepping out of the way and letting the bullies rule the schoolyard. Neoliberalism means the government arming the bullies with sticks and telling their victims to stand still. And that's why the proponents of neoliberalism hate the union movement, and I stand here proud to be a rank and file member of the Australian Services Union, comrades. Neoliberalism hates the union movement because what does the union movement do? Instead of standing still for those with the sticks, the union movement stands up collectively against those with the sticks. It means refusing to stand still while those sticks are wielded. And that's why we see these vicious attacks on the union movement. That's why we see such vicious inventions as the ABCC and the ROC. That's why we see a removal of the right to strike effectively and the right of entry. You know, you've got business exercising its right to withdraw capital, and yet workers are denied the right to withdraw labour. And make no mistake, those who break this nation's heart are not those who break unjust laws. Those who break this nation's heart are those who make unjust laws. And yet, under the guiding stars of struggle and hope, change is wrought. I can think of no example of progressive social change and social justice that has not come about through the people marching under the guiding stars of struggle and hope. Good legislation comes only from the collective struggle in the first instance. And the union movement is analysis organised, action organised, and most importantly, hope organised. Inequality, according to some of its champions, according to some of its dismal cheer squad, inequality is the measure of our freedom. Inequality is not the measure of our freedom. Inequality is the measure of our shame. Inequality is based on the principle of, to those who have much, more will be given. And from those who have nothing, even the little they have will be taken away. That's why you've got cuts to taxes for corporations and high wealth individuals coupled with cuts to social expenditure, stealing from the commons. Those who love neoliberalism, those who love inequality, hate the public sphere. They hate public health. They hate public housing. They hate the public sector. They hate anything that is public education, you name it, even the ABC. They hate that which is owned and available to all, and they glorify the notion of what you get is what you pay for individually. We stand for something different. We stand for a radical idea that has time and again been turned into a universal right, as we were reminded last night. We stand for the principle of from each according to their abilities and to each according to their needs. This was the principle upon which we built Medicare, public health, public education, a social security system, and a taxation system that is as it should be, a means of redistribution for all, not a means of reward for some. Inequality is not just manifested through unequal income and unequal wealth. It's also about unequal access to the good things of life, the things that make us human, the things that make us feel that we have a sense of dignity in community. Inequality is about crushing the soul as much as it is about material deprivation. Inequality manifests itself in the denial of freedoms to those who are its victims. And that's why we have neo-paternalistic policies rolled out, typified by compulsory income management or the cashless welfare card, taking away what little freedom is left to those who bear the brunt of inequality. Warren Buffett famously said, on class war, there's class war, all right, but we're the rich class, we're the ones that are waging it, and we're winning. Well, Warren, you're right about the first part. You were winning it, but not anymore, mate, not anymore. Because, my friends, we know that the role of government, the role of good government, is to achieve collectively the dreams of the many, rather than pandering to the demands of the wealthy few. And we struggle with everything we've got because we know that inequality isn't an abstract idea, it's something that takes away the joy in people's lives. It makes people feel as if their stories are theirs alone. But we know that the causes of their pain are collective, are structural, are historical. And we know from the women's movement that the personal is political, and that the only way to address these stories of personal pain is through collective action. The only way to achieve change is united together, those who are excluded and those who are exploited. It's time we did away with that false dividing line between those who are in paid work and those who are not. Neoliberalism has virtually eliminated that dividing line, so let's make the most of that historical fact and turn it into a cause for unity between those who are in paid work and those who are not. I'd like to leave you with the very beautiful and powerful words of a First Nations activist from this great city, Lilla Watson, who famously said, "If you have come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." Thank you, comrades.